This gorgeous houseplant is called an Aglaonema, also known as a Chinese evergreen, and it's a terrific houseplant for a number of reasons. It's absolutely beautiful. They come in a vast array of different stunning colors. It's very low maintenance and thrives on neglect, which we always appreciate. It also has health benefits. This plant is ideal for just about anyone, but especially for beginners who are looking for a plant that's resilient and forgiving. Also people with low light spaces like north-facing windows or office cubicles. Frequent travelers or busy plant parents who might forget a watering or two. I have to say I probably fall into that category myself. And with there being so many different colors and varieties, it's perfect for people wanting a pop of color in their home and brightly colored foliage without needing flowers. Another interesting fact is these plants are highly valued in feng shui, and they're thought to bring luck, balance, and harmony into your life. I'm just saying it never hurts to have a little bit of extra luck, balance, and harmony in our lives. And NASA did something called a clean air study where they studied different types of plants to see which ones removed toxins from the air. Aglaonema were one of the few that really removed a lot of different common toxins in the air, including benzene and formaldehyde. It's important to note though that these are not pet friendly and they are toxic. In this houseplant care video, I'm going to talk all about Aglaonema and everything you need to do to make this plant thrive, including watering, lighting, soil, repotting, to the type of pot you need, propagation as well, because that's something you'll want to know with this plant, fertilizing, and anything else you might need to know. I'll also include timestamps in the description below in case there's a certain segment that you're specifically interested in. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. First up with care, it's always really important and helpful to know where a plant originates from so we can try to mimic that environment as much as possible in our homes. So Aglaonemas actually originate from Southeast Asia in tropical forests, and they grow in humid, really shaded areas. And that's one of the reasons why they make such terrific houseplants, is because they're used to somewhat lowish light in their natural habitat, and they're very adaptable. Lighting for Aglaonemas is pretty straightforward. They are somewhat low light tolerant, which is one of the reasons why we love these plants. However, you will want to match your lighting with the variety. So if you have a variety that has really bright leaves, pink, red, those plant varieties are going to need a little bit of extra light to help maintain those vibrant colors. They might revert to a darker color and they won't be quite as vibrant if they're not getting enough light. So in those aspects, I would say a couple feet away from a window would be great, or a little extra supplemental lighting if you needed it. Now, if you have an Aglaonema that has a lot of green leaves or dark green leaves, those are the ones that are going to do well in lower light conditions and be able to at least tolerate that a little bit better. Please note that all plants need light to survive, and the lower of light that the plant is going to be in, the harder it's going to be for that plant to survive. However, if that's all you have to work with, Aglaonemas are a good choice to go with, as well as like ZZs and snake plants. Aglaonemas can have a bit of a reaction if they're getting too much sun on their leaves, and they get sunburned easily. So that's why we say bright and direct light, where we don't want to just keep it in a window where it's going to be getting direct afternoon light. Normally morning light is okay because the UV index is a little bit lower. Just like us, if we go out in the morning with a lot of sun, we should be okay, but maybe that afternoon sunlight, we're more prone to sunburn. It's the same thing with our plants. Now, when it comes to watering, again, Aglaonemas can thrive on neglect, which we appreciate a lot of times as plant parents. However, these plants don't really want to be dried out for extended periods of time. So I would say when the soil is about halfway to almost fully dry, at that point, give this plant a really good drink. Don't just give it a little water. Water it thoroughly, let it get a good drink, whether you water it from the top or allow it to soak up water from the bottom of the pot. As long as it has drainage holes, it can be bottom watered. And then wait until the soil is about halfway to fully dry again. And you can stick your finger in and do this. Some people will stick in a chopstick to see what the moisture's like. You can also use a moisture meter. These are great. They're really inexpensive, and it will tell you, into the bottom of the pot how much moisture is in the soil. Now, Aglaonema might give you some hints as to if you're overwatering or underwatering. First of all, if you're seeing a lot of yellowing leaves, that might indicate that you are overwatering your plant and your plant is getting root rot. Now, root rot is the easiest way to kill a plant. It basically means when the roots have been sitting in water, in soil that's way too saturated, and it can cause like bacterial problems. The root doesn't have access to air, and ultimately the plant like suffocates and drowns and the roots die off. And it can be kind of hard to stop that process once it starts. So I always suggest to err on the side of caution and to underwater rather than overwater. And one of the easiest ways to make sure you're not overwatering your plant is when you go to water it, check that the soil is like not already too moist. And I know that sounds like common sense, but when we get busy, we don't want to go around and check every plant. But it really is worth it. I have learned so many hard lessons as a plant parent over the last few years. And one of the lessons that I've learned is that I need to make sure I have the right kind of soil, because we want a soil that's well draining for these tropical plants. And I learned that the hard way. I would just use like a standard potting mix. And what would happen is my plants would all get root rot, even if I was careful about how much I watered them, this and that. So you just want to make sure you have the right kind of soil, because no matter how much water you give your plant, if you have the right kind of soil, it's not going to retain too much to cause root rot. So a simple, easy soil recipe for Aglaonema is a 50% potting mix. So the potting mix is going to retain moisture, and then maybe like a 25% perlite and 25% orchid bark. You just want the mixture to be nice and airy, which will promote airflow in the roots while still maintaining some of that moisture so that the plant gets the moisture it needs. But with that soil blend, you won't have to worry about root rot. And these plants only need to be repotted every couple of years. So they're not fast growing plants, which in a way is kind of nice because you won't have to worry about constantly repotting it because it's grown huge. You won't have to constantly be trimming it back. So with that said, if you have the right type of soil, you just won't have to worry about it for a couple of years, and it'll be ready to repot, down the road. I got this plant from a big box shop recently, and I am going to repot it. There are some things I wanted to mention about like little baskets in the soil that you might see. I just want to make sure this one doesn't have that. And I'm also going to show how to like propagate it by division, make sure the roots look good. I just always really like to repot a plant when I bring it home, once it's adapted to my like home environment. So everything that I'm using today is from rePotme. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm partnered with them, and I'm so proud to be partnered with them. It's really an honor because their plant supplies are just next level. I love all of them, and all of the products will be linked in the description below. And feel free if you have any questions. This potting mat is also from rePotme, and I absolutely love this potting mat because I'm kind of messy with repotting and stuff. I saw someone that said, like, if you're a plant parent, you always have soil on your floor, and it's so true. So today I'm going to be using their houseplant and tropical classic potting mix, and any kind of like aeroid potting mix. There are a lot of different customized soil blends that you can find from all different companies. If you don't want to make your own soil, it's a little bit easier, especially if you're only repotting every couple of years. It's worth it to make sure you have the right kind of soil. So let's take a look at the roots. This plant was $17. Oh, see, this is what I'm talking about. That would be all over my floor. All right, the roots look so good. Now I tend not to want to disturb the roots too much because I don't want the plant to focus solely on root growth and then not put out beautiful foliage of the leaves. However, these plants are known to sometimes have little baskets around their roots that can be constricting for the plant's growth. So I'm just gonna make sure there's not baskets. The other thing that's nice is that Aglaonema have really thick roots. Some of these plants, when I'm repotting them, they have such tiny little delicate root systems that if I just sneeze wrong, I break off a bunch of the roots. That's not going to be a worry so much with this plant. As always, I recommend watering your plant a few days before you repot so those roots are nice and plump and hydrated and you have less chance of tearing them. And it also helps the soil to be removed a little bit easier if that's one of the things you want to do. This soil is actually really nice. They have big chunky bits of orchid bark. It's really rare that I'm repotting a plant, especially from a big box shop, and I really like the soil, but they did a good job with this one. I see some little fertilizer balls in here as well. I'm not seeing a basket. which is a relief. It's important to refresh your soil every couple of years, even if your plant has not outgrown its pot, because the soil can become hydrophobic, meaning that it's not going to retain moisture anymore. That's not the case with this one. That's when the soil is really compact. You can use a chopstick or something to loosen up the soil a bit, but if your plant soil has become hydrophobic, it's time to repot that plant. Give it new life, give it new soil. It will be so happy, and it'll help it retain nutrients better. Over time, the soil can collect like mineral buildup, so it's just good over time, every couple of years, to repot no matter what. Look how great these roots are. This is terrific. There are a number of ways to propagate Aglaonema, and I'm going to share 2 of them. The first one is by division. So as you can see, there are 3 different plants on this Aglaonema, and this one is already pulling apart. So we're just going to pull it apart. You could even use a knife if you wanted to. Like for this one, these plants are really connected. So you can just use a knife, use shears, and then trim the plant off and propagate by division. Now you just want to make sure that when you do that, that both plants have a good established root system, and you want to leave roots on both plants. Now this one is breaking away pretty easily. So it may be 2 plants anyways that were potted up here. But Aglaonemas will put off pups and little side plants. You can see there's a little tiny baby pup starting here. So other than propagating by division is that you can just propagate by trimming or pruning the plant back. So you want to make sure that there is like a little bit of a node, because that's where the roots are going to come out. Now I'm going to be propagating this in water, and in order to have the highest chance of success with that, you want to make sure that the plant only has like a couple of leaves. So this looks like this is the oldest leaf, so I'm just going to pull that one back. Fortunately, this plant doesn't have a lot of leaves on it, so I'm just going to put that in water. You can use distilled rainwater, bottled water. You can use tap water if you want to, but I recommend avoiding tap water for propagation specifically if you can, just because they have a lot of different chemicals and minerals in them. So you just set that in there. Now some people like using rooting hormone, so you could like put a little bit in the water if you wanted to. If it's that kind of water soluble rooting hormone, you could dip it in rooting hormone powder. It's not necessary. You can just put it in water like this as well. And Aglaonemas again are slow growing, so it's going to take quite a while compared to other plants like pothos, which will root up, it seems, very, very quickly. Aglaonema, it takes a while. So if it's been a few weeks and you're not really seeing a lot of roots yet, then just give it time. Like, patience is key with Aglaonemas. Now, if you're noticing a lot of if it starts to look mushy and brown, then your propagation just didn't take. If you're just seeing like a little bit of like a mucousy film on the outside of the plant, that's super normal. That's like what happens before the roots come out. You will want to put this somewhere where it's getting a good amount of light though. Now Aglaonema are pretty easygoing. They don't need like a specific type of pot, but I do recommend that whatever type of pot you use, always make sure that there are a lot of drainage holes on the bottom. This helps prevent root rot and a lot of different issues. Now these are the clear slotted orchid pots from rePotme, but there are lots of different places that you can get nursery pots. I always like to plant up my plants in nursery pots because I can switch out cover pots. I'll probably continue to use this cover pot, but I won't need to repot the plant every time I want a different pot, because I'll just keep it in the nursery pot. And obviously not this size, but I'll keep it in the nursery pot and then put it in different pots if I want to. Some people like doing that, right? Like based on their decor at that time. It also enables me to keep an eye on the moisture, keep an eye on the roots. It just makes it easy. I can just by a glance see how the plant is doing. It's not a mystery. Sometimes we just need all the help we can get, you know? And nursery pots are just like a little extra help. All right, I think that's a good size. So you always want to go about 1 to 2 inches bigger than the root ball. You don't want to go 1 to 2 inches bigger than the existing pot. A lot of times these plants are potted up in pots that are too big anyways. So always keep an eye on the root ball and go according to that. Now repotting always feels like such a big deal until I do it and I'm like, this took like 5 minutes. What was the big holdup? So if you're procrastinating repotting, we're coming into the growing season, I recommend just going ahead and doing it. It won't take as long as you think. And I love that I have 2 Aglaonema plants now. instead of just the one. Well, 3 actually, because I have the other one at propagating in water. You guys look so good. Now time to water. The first watering after repotting is always done by the top. It allows the plant to like really settle in. So I'm just gonna put some water on the top here. I can't find my watering can. I think I left it in my plant room. So give it a good drink. And you see how it's already draining out? That's a really good sign. We really want it to be well draining. And I am gonna just let this sit in the water for a minute and kind of not only get it from the top, but kind of absorb up through the roots. Aglaonema will put out blooms. That's one of the reasons I chose this plant, because I wanted to show you what I prefer doing when Aglaonemas bloom. Now, Aglaonema, when they're blooming, will direct a lot of their energy, like a surprising amount, to keeping that bloom alive. So what I would recommend doing is trimming the blooms off of the Aglaonemas so that it helps to reserve the energy for the leaves and the plant's growth. You may notice that your leaves are like getting really tiny while the plant is blooming, like the new leaves by the bloom are smaller than the rest of the leaves. And that could be from the plant putting a lot of its energy towards the bloom and not the leaves. And these are slow growing plants anyways. So just trim that bloom back. Also trim off any like dark yellowing leaves. It's super normal for Aglaonema to do that with its old leaves where they're just like yellow and not looking great. So we're just gonna get some little shears and trim back that bloom. Fertilizing our plants with a lot of foliage is very, very important, especially during the growing months, which is what we're in right now. So coming into spring, all through summer, and then at the very beginning of fall, you want to taper off the fertilizing in the fall months, because a lot of these plants, the tropical plants, go dormant in the fall and the winter months. But these plants need to be fertilized because they only have the nutrients in their pot. As you saw when I repotted this plant, there were little like fertilizer balls already in the soil. So what I prefer to use is a water soluble fertilizer because I have more control over that rather than the soil always being fertilized by the little fertilizer balls. But to each their own, there's no wrong way. Everybody has their preference. I feel like plant care is a journey and everybody has their own individual journey. I'm just here to like share what I've learned over the years. And some little tips and tricks, but I'm always learning. So please feel free to leave in the comments things that have worked for you because I love learning new tips and tricks. But the water-soluble houseplant fertilizer will be perfect. Just one that says for houseplants, maybe something balanced like a 20-20-20, something like that. And I always start at half strength in the beginning, kind of wakes your plants up, gives that plant a minute to kind of figure out that it's ready to come alive for the spring months and the growing season. And also it gives you a chance to observe that plant, see how it does with the fertilizing, making sure that it's not damaging the plant in any way. And if all looks good, you can go to full strength during the growing months. Again, lesson learned, always carefully read the instructions on the back. I've made that mistake and over fertilized all my plants and all the leaves were like burning and turning brown. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was because I was over fertilizing. So just common sense. Maybe it's just a me thing, but be careful how much fertilizer you're putting in your water. Temperature and humidity is about the same as other easy care tropical plant varieties. So I'd say if you're temperature-wise comfortable in your home, your plant will be too. If you're cold, your plants are probably cold. And as far as humidity, I'd say about a 50% humidity is ideal for these plants, 50% or above. Now, if you have lower humidity than that, that will probably be okay for Aglaonemas. One of the ways to know if your plant can handle your humidity is if the new leaves are looking good. You might see where the old leaves are crisping, like I'm seeing that on this plant, but there's an adjustment period that happens when it comes from the greenhouse, which has literally the most ideal conditions possible. And then it comes into our home and it will have an adjustment time. So as long as those new leaves are looking good and not crisping, that means your plant's adapted to your environment and you're good to go. However, if you're noticed that your leaves are crisping, but you've been consistent with watering, it's not a drought thing, then it probably does need higher humidity. And this goes for all tropical plants. Then you'll want to give it like maybe a humidifier or a misting, pebble tray, stuff like that. There's all sorts of creative options you can do to increase the humidity for your plants. So lastly, let's talk about pests. Pests are inevitable with houseplants. It's not something to panic about. I've learned there are all sorts of helpful products and ways to take care of pests. The first thing to do is make sure in the store there's no pests on your plant. Really give it a thorough look down. Check the leaves. On Aglaonema, it shouldn't be that difficult because the leaves are so big. Go through, take a look. If it's possible to look at the roots in the store, I recommend doing that as well. Not only to check for pests, but to check for root rot. There's nothing worse than bringing a plant home and it immediately like dies on you, and it's because the plant got root rot in the stores. Especially in these big box shops, you'll notice that a lot of the plants they sit in water in their cover pots, and that's just there's no success to bring that plant home. Like there's no chance of success if it already has a bunch of root rot. So check it at the store, make sure there aren't any issues. When you bring it home, wash those leaves off. 10 out of 10 recommend. It's like the simplest thing to do, especially if you have like a spray nozzle or a hose outside, something with a little bit of power to it. Spray those leaves down and the stems, because there could be little eggs in there, that'll like eliminate a lot of the problem. Lastly, I have some products that might help. There are 2 products I can't live without when it comes to managing pests, and there's different brands. You can use what's available to you, but the first one is systemic granules. This thing has saved me when it comes to taking care of my plants and preventing pests and getting rid of pests. So it treats everything except for spider mites. Fungus gnats also, this gets rid of fungus gnats. So I don't even have to use mosquito bits that much anymore. Like, I can't remember the last time I did mosquito bits because of this. Use on this is very easy. You don't want to put it into a watering can. What you want to do is directly put it into the top of the soil, and then it has like the amounts on the back, and then you water the plant after you've put the systemic granules into the soil, and the plant's roots will absorb up the active ingredient in the systemic granules, and then the plant itself will absorb it, and then any pests that get in the soil or on the plant will be contaminated with that active ingredient, and it works like a charm. The other product that I recommend is insecticidal soap. This gets rid of all the different insects, thrips, mealybugs, but spider mites. Like systemic granules will help with the other ones, but this is just so great for spider mites. You spray it on the leaves, you can wipe it off, wash it off, retreat if you want to. It's pretty good for most plants. I've had good experience. It hasn't like killed off the leaves or burned the leaves or damaged the leaves. It's always a good suggestion to like test a leaf before you use this. If you're worried about it, you could apply it, like spray it all over your plant, let it sit for an hour, and then wash it off if you're worried about it burning the leaves. But it works like a charm. So if there are 2 products I recommend to help you with pests, bam. Bam, there we go. These are the 2. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to leave your comments and tips and tricks. We have such a knowledgeable plant community. Leave your questions. I'll do my best to answer them. If you want to see more plant care, plant shopping, planty videos in your newsfeed, definitely subscribe. We also have a fabulous community on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I get to see you soon. Bye.